Good evening. We will call this meeting to order now. It is 7:05 on May 18th, 2023, and this is a public meeting of the City of Portland's Police Accountability Commission Subcommittee on Broader Systems. If the Spanish interpreters, Ariel and Maria, could give the information in Spanish, please, that would be wonderful.
Esta reunión es una reunión pública sujeta a la ley del Estado de Oregon y las normas administrativas de la ciudad de Portland y se grabará. Tendremos interpretación en español para esta reunión. Cuando acceda a la interpretación en español, verá la transmisión de video de los oradores, pero la transmisión de audio será reemplazada por el intérprete. Para acceder a esto, haga clic en Interpretación de idiomas en los controles de la reunión de Zoom, en la parte inferior de su pantalla y seleccione español.
Thank you. The city also offers ASL interpretation, which is being provided by Katie and Kevin today. Please pin their video feed to see their interpretation throughout the meeting. The closed captioning is turned on in Zoom as another means of assistance. Please note this is an automatic captioning service and it's not always accurate. The city supports access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and can provide other language support as well. Please email in advance of future public meetings, either as a response to public meetings notice or directly to policeaccountability@portlandoregon.gov to ask for other access assistance, including interpretation in other languages. This meeting is a public meeting subject to City of Portland's Administrative Code and Oregon State law and is being recorded. For this meeting, the chat function is enabled for commission members to communicate with each other. Members of the public will be able to ask questions using the Zoom's Q&A feature. As the commissioners are presenting or discussing things, if attendees have questions, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A. We hope to use this feature to help guide our conversation during the meetings and future meeting agenda topics. We'd like to be clear that not all questions will be answered during the meeting, but if answered before the meeting, questions will be visible to you. We'd like to be clear that not all questions will be answered during the meeting, but if answered, both the question and answer will be visible to you and will become part of the meeting record. To access this feature, just click on the Q&A icon in the middle of your screen. I will now pass it to our co-chair to do the land acknowledgement.
Ahora viene la copresidente a hacer el reconocimiento de la tierra.
Greetings, everybody. Sima Husseini, he, him, his. Yeah, we acknowledge that the rivers, lakes, streams, and lands of the lower Willamette River rest upon occupied territories of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Willamette, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes. We recognize the many villages, traditions, cultures, and relationships that existed along the river since time immemorial. We recognize these tribes stewarded these lands and rivers since time immemorial for future generations. We recognize and undertake responsibility for the destruction of the river and land, of traditional food sources, sacred places, and multifaceted ways of life. We acknowledge the economic and social values that enable harm to the river, including systemic racism, classism, and other systems of oppression that perpetuated harm against Black, Indigenous, and immigrant communities along the river. With this acknowledgement, we commit to honoring and learning from the past in working towards a more equitable and sustainable future for the lower Willamette River. We commit to seeking solutions that acknowledge the inequities of past socioeconomic policies and the harm done to people and our relationships to these lands and waters. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go over the community agreements. Please take time to read. We have 3 pages. Let's see.
Can you just hold on one moment?
Mhm.
I'm having some difficulty with the Spanish interpretation. And we're gonna work on that outside of just if interpreter Ayel, if you can hold on just a moment. And
Yeah.
if Maria, if you
Okay,
it's you solo for a minute while we get this figured out. Thank you.
Yep.
okay.
Okay, we can go to the next page, Victoria. Thank you so much. And go to the 3rd page. If you notice that a conversation is coming close to violating a community agreement, please call your fellow commissioner members in gently and with compassion. If you are called in, please take a moment to consider how you can best participate in the space while still respecting the community agreements and making space for everyone. Do we all commit to the following community agreements for today's meeting and to gently call in our colleagues and collaborators if needed? Can I see a show of hands? I'm good with that. Okay. Thank you. I will now pass it on to the co-chairs to discuss the timeline.
Christian has their hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna hit, go ahead, Christian, before. Is there?
Sorry, I don't know why it's doing that. It says that it's not raised on my end, but I saw
Oh.
that it stayed up and I thought maybe it'd disappear. I'll click
Okay,
around
it's
a bit
gone.
more and
It's
see if
gone.
it stops.
It's
Okay,
gone.
sorry.
It's
There
gone
must have
now.
been a weird delay. Sorry about that.
Okay, yeah, I didn't think you were trying to raise your hand.
No, yeah, it's all good. No worries. Thanks.
Thank you, Seema. Go ahead. You're on mute, Seema.
Okay, yes.
Commissioner Seema, sorry.
No worries. We fan here. All right, so the Police Accountability Commission has split its work into 6 phases. It's now moving into the 5th phase of
Esta
work, which is the
comisión
transition
trabaja en
to
6
one
fases,
broader
ahora se
system.
está
Yep.
acercando la fase.
Just
Oh.
one moment, sorry, just pause.
Ariel, disculpa, es que sabes que
Ajá.
te estaba mandando un mensaje, se está oyendo lo que estás interpretando. Entonces, si podrías pausar un ratito mientras el staff
Ok.
arregla eso, por favor.
Ah, bueno, está bien.
Muchas gracias.
So The commission will work until, as you see right here in the bolder text, that the commission will work until August 31st, 2023, and will present its proposals to the city council for their consideration and approval. Now, this slide shows the outcome. For the next slide, I think we'll move into. There we go. This slide shows the outcome documents. Wait, does it? Are we on the? Yes. Okay. We're sorry. This slide shows the outcome documents for the transition plan and broader systems phase, based on the agenda and scope approved by the commission. Now that the PAC has developed a rough draft of what the new system will look like, the PAC will, in this phase, develop a transition plan for how to get from here to there. An understanding of how the process of implementing the new system will change or interact with other police oversight systems, levels of government, and also will name a few oversight boards and bureaus. And on this slide is the current project plan for the transition plan and the broader system phase of the Police Accountability Commission's work. This slide is for members of the public to be able to understand how the commission gets from now through the end of the phase. Today's meeting falls into the gold box with the purple border near the bottom of the left screen. And following today, here are the upcoming meetings of the Police Accountability Commission. We'd like to highlight the subcommittee on transition plan. They meet next Thursday on May 25th. The Portland City Council will be holding a work session with the Police Accountability Commission next Tuesday, May 23rd, from 9:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. And this is open to the public, both virtually and in person. I look forward to seeing you there in person. Today's meeting is the first meeting of the subcommittee on broader systems, and we'll start with member introductions. Then we will review the subcommittee's mandate. After that, we'll have some discussions around desired briefers for the subcommittees and around the draft outline of the eventual areas of agreement on broader systems. Finally, there will be open to public comment on anything under the subcommittee's work plan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
At this time, we will go into introductions for the board that's here, the commission that's here right now. So would you like to start, Commissioner Sima?
Yes, my name is Simab Husseini. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a community organizer. My scope of practice has always held me primarily focusing on Muslim communities, and a lot of the concentric circles that wind up happening with these Muslim communities are working on those that are less privileged in these communities, such as immigrants and refugees, asylum seekers, Black community members, as well as those that actually affect our community partners, farm workers, and a lot of folks within the labor movement in itself. My turn in this focus I've recently probably spent the last maybe 6 years building a lot more strength in focusing a lot of this form of organizing around police accountability for many reasons. Lived experiences growing up in Los Angeles, born and raised, living up here for 14 years, seeing the dearth of organizing around my communities when it comes to holding police accountable, especially how the abuse of power coming from from federal oversight, from federal agencies such as the FBI to and their Joint Terrorism Task Force, to programmatic instruction over the communities that manipulate communities, such as countering violent extremism. And so a lot of these focuses has led me to really understand the scope and practice of what's taking place on a wider scale, and how to try and drill it into my local communities, protect them and inform them. That's what's brought me here today. Thank you.
And who will you pass it to?
I will pass the mic to Cameron Brown, Commissioner Brown.
Hi, thanks, Seema. My name is Cameron Brown. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a lifelong resident of Northeast Portland, small business owner. I'm a freelance photographer. I have a lot of experience in Portland through the journalism that I have done for the last 19 years of my life. And I'm just excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Who are you going to pass it to?
How about Commissioner Tirsa?
Thank you. I'm Tirsa Ariana, she, her. I'm a commissioner on the Police Accountability Commission. I come from an over-policed community. I grew up seeing a lot of police brutality down in Southern California, particularly South Central LA. I have been in Portland for a decade. I have worked with the immigration community here in the Portland Metro, and happy to be on this subcommittee.
Thank you.
And Debbie, would you want to go next?
Sure, thank you, Tirsa. I'm sorry, Debbie Iona, she, her. I got involved in this issue through the League of Women Voters of Portland. I've been a member since the 70s and lived in several states, but have been in Portland for well over 30 years and been a member of the league all that time. What's interesting is, I guess my impression of League of Women Voters is I never would have thought they would be involved or interested in police issues, but it really, in Portland anyway, the interest dates, the organization's interest dates back a long time. And a couple of days ago, we actually took a tour of the city archives building, and the archivist pulled out a few things that she thought we might be interested in seeing. One was a study done. It was the third part of a study done in 1969 on law enforcement in Portland. And then she also had a folder of letters that organizations and people had sent in about some concept back then about community oversight or involvement or something in the Portland police. And she said she paged through the letters, and she said there were 2 or 3 that were in favor of having that community oversight. She said most of them were not. And so yeah, I just think it's so interesting, this very long history of our organization caring about this. And then I got involved back in 2000. It was my first, taste of this, when I was asked to stand in for somebody who went off on vacation on the Mayor Cass's work group on reform of PAC, which was the precursor to IPR. And so I never in a million years would have thought I'd be interested in this, but clearly now it's almost 25 years later, and it still fascinates me, and I'm really happy to be able to help, come up with this, new system. So let's see. Sophia, Commissioner Sophia, would you like to go next?
She said that she needed a few minutes, so maybe Commissioner Christian?
I missed him.
No worries. Oh, no worries. That's all good. I'm a Christian or Christian. I use they or he pronouns are fine. I'm open to anything, but that's what people usually fall on, which is okay with me. And I'm a smorgasbord of things. I'm an artist. I do a lot of artwork around the area. I also have helped to organize some stuff. Sometimes those two fields overlap as well. And I'm also part of I forget what the word is, community impacted by over policing, over police community. I've been arrested before, stuff like that. I kind of got into this work just through being in that experience and hoping to try and help a little bit. I heard about it, I forget how, but I just applied and now I'm here. And I'm happy to help, or at least try to. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. I think that will sum up our introductions for now, till Sophia comes back. She'll introduce herself when she gets able to get back on. Oh, I thought it was her, but it was Simon. So this is the first subcommittee. First, the subcommittee will review the commission's mandate as it relates to this issue, and the subcommittee itself, as well as its timeline and how it relates to other subcommittees for this part. And I suppose I will be passing this on to staff.
Thank you very much. So this portion, the agenda item on subcommittee mandate and overview, is designed to illustrate the mandate being given by council to the PAC and from the PAC to this phase, from this phase to the subcommittee, and that's how we end up here. So quickly we'll share our screen here, and we'll start with resolution 37527. This is the resolution that established the PAC, and just starts off with a lot of things about the application process, but the main thing that's notable here is that the commission is tasked with developing the structure and processes of the new system and ensuring that the requirements of the framework within the city charter are met. We'll get to the relevant part of that as we go forward. Under resolution 37548, which is the scope of work of the commission, the light purple color is what we're looking at here. We'll circle back to the green in a minute, but the task the commission with deciding on whether different aspects of the current oversight system will function or cease to function, and also opens the door to winding down portions of the current oversight system as well, which we'll talk about as well. So that is part of how the PAC, part of the basis of what the PAC is authorized to do. Switching gears to the agenda and scope, this is a document created by the PAC to organize its own functions into 6 phases, as co-chair Seema talked about earlier. In this phase, the transition plan and broader system phase, there were some questions that needed to be asked in light purple again: how the board will relate to other city entities focused on police, how does a new board relate to the county and state, and how does a new board relate to the DOJ and settlement agreement process. It also asks which entities within the city need to be adjusted to fit with the new board. These tasks were specifically assigned to this subcommittee on April 24th, in which the PAC created a subcommittee to develop draft areas of agreement on the broader system document, to refer to the full commission, encompassing the board relationship with other entities, and change to other city entities as part of board implementation. The timeline for this subcommittee is through the end of this phase, which is estimated to be the end of June, and will meet likely 4 or 5 times. Before moving on to talk about the other subcommittee and how these two relate, I did want to note that the PAC's scope and the subcommittees is to briefly develop the ideal relationship between the oversight board and other parts of the oversight system on different levels of government, as well as those parts of the city government related to police and policing that remain intact. For city entities related to the current accountability and oversight system only, it also includes a council charge to decide whether to recommend that some of those groups or entities be adapted or sunsetted in some way. Switching back to the other subcommittee, the subcommittee on transition plan, their role is in green. That group is working on developing a transition plan, including key dates and transfers of responsibilities. Questions related to the transition, like does IPR staff have preference to apply for positions with the new oversight board, and how and when to wind down or transfer ongoing investigations after the oversight board is fully operational. The reason IPR staff is mentioned there is because it's already known that IPR will be wrapping up and ceasing operations. However, if there was a proposed change from this subcommittee to sunset or change any other part of city government, the subcommittee on transition plan would need to put that into their timeline. As a result, the scheduling for this phase of work will probably have this subcommittee ending slightly before that one, so that they have time to incorporate anything you recommend into their outcome document. And that's sort of the charge to the subcommittee. Switching gears to the content review, and this is the charter text. The charter doesn't really talk much about the relationship with the broader system, other than in the very first sentence, in which it talks about a general requirement to comply with legal obligations the city may have under the Public Employees Collective Bargaining Act and other state and federal laws. And specific references to the relationships with the Portland Police Bureau and City Council in the charter, which are already developed in other documents by the PAC. However, previous areas of agreement documents do have relevance to this subcommittee. Apologies. So starting with the barriers and best practices document, there are some indirect references to the complexity of the system, some of which are very direct on complaints, but also relates to the portion of the oversight system that includes other bodies. I'm going to pause here just a moment. Sorry about that, lost my voice. Some parts of the current system are duplicative, confusing, and contradictory. It refers to both internal affairs and various advisory bodies here. Moving down, burdensome parts of the accountability system disproportionately impact community members who are part of historically excluded groups, and it specifically talks about community members participating in the accountability system, not merely through the complaint process. On the legal side, in relationship with other portions of other levels of government, the current system is governed and protected by several layers of local, state, and federal law and policy, including and especially labor law. Number 12 talks about comprehensive power. And just as a side note, we're going to circle back to all of this text in the second half. It's in the outline document that we're going to be looking at later on in this meeting. So number 12 talks about comprehensive power lacking in the current civilian portion of the accountability system. And finally, inadequate resources for community oversight talks about how community volunteers often feel like their work on other bodies is ineffectual because it lacks real authority. Although this isn't exactly a values and goals, or values and goals aren't exactly an area of agreement, there's a lot of reference in here to some of the principles behind ensuring that community members are aware of what they are signing up for in terms of comprehensiveness and power of the accountability system. Oops. In the structural oversight document, I'm actually going to switch for this one over to the outline because it's a little easier to show it there. Oh, sorry, skipped access to information. So the oversight board with the assistance of legal counsel shall have the authority to subpoena witnesses, and it talks about the relationship with the counties for the enforcement of subpoenas if necessary. Failure to comply relates to state law. So there's some references to county and state law in the subpoena section. Under the access to police records section, there's a part about access to databases which are governed by portions of other levels of government or are affected by that. In the case of these two databases, which are not run by the Police Bureau, but which they subscribe to, it was discussed that the FBI would be involved in these. From the areas of agreement on officer accountability, it foresees that the oversight board would at times need to refer cases to the district attorney, which is a county office, for criminal investigation when the incident or allegations indicate possible criminal activity. From structural oversight, and some of these, by the way, may be sufficiently addressed in these documents already, and some may need more explanation. So from structural oversight, The board may officially endorse ideas and may testify in front of relevant government bodies and communicate its policy positions with employees and elected officials at any level of government. And then under board membership, there's just two parts here. Board members cannot simultaneously be members of any other government-run advisory group related to police and policing, which is not directly relevant to it, but does indicate a desire to look at those other advisory groups potentially. And then C5 and D6 have to do with confidentiality of applicant information, which was affected both by public records law at the state level and the county DA, which is where public records requests for redaction and things like that may go to the county DA as well for information. And then from oversight staff, because we didn't find anything in reporting and transparency, it does talk about policy discussion, including local, state, and federal laws, which are not necessarily police bureau policies. And then I'm seeing in the Q&A that the barriers document may have one other thing that we skipped. Just going to circle back to that real quick. Yes, thank you. The police investigating other police being a portion of number 15 here, in particular, that second part. PPB-IA investigations give a tremendous amount of deference to involved officers. PPB officer judgment receives wide latitude from IA investigators. IA investigations are not rigorous enough, especially when officer statements and physical evidence do not match up. So that is the portion of other previous areas of agreement documents, which are relevant to this particular subcommittee's work. And I think that may be everything. Oh, sorry, there is one other thing in the existing garden plot items, and it's a big one that's been postponed many times, which is, will the commission recommend sunsetting or eliminating internal affairs? So for those who've been on for a while and paying attention, that question has come up several times and has been noted that it's not in the current phase, it's in the next, it's coming up, and now it's up. So that is a question that the subcommittee would need to address. I'll pause here because that was a lot of information and ask if there are any questions on any of that before we move on to the next item.
And I do want to say I appreciate our ASL interpreters for keeping up.
I'll pass it back over to facilitator 7.
Just checking that I'm on the right channel now.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Oh, no. Oh. Well, I don't know what happened. What can I do here on my end?
When you go to the menu, it's not showing up for us to put you in that channel. So we're not sure why that is yet.
Yeah, that's strange.
Let's try to figure that out at the break, if that's okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so the next on our agenda is the round robin discussion.
Ayomide, facilitator Ayomide, would
Yes.
you like Commissioner Sophia to introduce herself before I share these slides?
Absolutely. Thank you. Would you like to introduce yourself, Commissioner Sophia?
Yeah, sure. My name is Sophia Glenn. I'm one of the commissioners. I don't think there's much more I can say at this point, but I'm glad to be here and glad everyone's here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Facilitator Victoria, for pointing out that she was here. Appreciate that. Okay, so next on our agenda is a discussion about briefings and who the subcommittee members would like to hear from, invite, and be briefed by. This is a round robin discussion. So it's designed to have all members speak once and provide their ideas, thoughts, and both questions. Each member has up to 2 minutes, and I'll be calling on members to speak. After everyone has spoken, we can move on. Please feel free to pass if you need more time to think, and I can come back to you. Be brief in your discussion. Everyone can, oh yeah, I said all those things. Look, be facilitated, and I will be using a weighted stack, and be constructive and forward thinking and just in your discussions, to make the commissioner's work more successful. So I believe, let's see, I'm going to start off. I'm going to be picking on you, CMOB, because you're holding the big seat today. Can you start us off?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one for me. I really want to kind of pick the brains of those in this subcommittee as to who we've heard from in the past that would seem valuable again, versus those we have not heard from yet that would also seem valuable. And it's fine also to talk. I'm a hater, so it's fine to talk about those that are not valuable and people we don't want to hear from. And whatnot, and just have that as a discussion as well. But I'm really open to kind of listening right now and trying to figure out and document this.
Also in the chat, staff has said not all these briefings will necessarily occur in the subcommittee, but it's more, who do you want to hear from and who do you want to talk to? And so I leave the floor open for whomever wants to speak up next. Commissioner Cameron.
Hi, thank you. I guess I'd be interested in hearing, I get the last thing that staff mentioned was the IPR and the internal affairs and what we're doing with them. We might have heard from them before, but I don't think I haven't. And it'd be interesting to hear what they feel that they need from us in our transition plan, and what services they have for, I don't know if their staff wanted to somehow transition or become a part of get preference or preferred something into the new board staff. I think those would be people that'd be interesting to hear from. Yeah, that's my thought.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Iona.
So one of the things that came up at the city council meeting yesterday was there was some discussion about subpoenas and who would enforce them. And so I think it would be helpful to, I don't know if it would be talking to somebody in the DA's office, because if I remember right, under that, whichever area of agreement is mentioned, we say that the oversight board, and it's in the charter too, have the authority to issue subpoenas, but then the question is who enforces them. And so I think it'd be interesting to find out what the DA's, I guess it's the DA that who does that, but it'd be interesting to find out if that's an option and how that would be managed. I just want to make one note though. I'm kind of still feeling, even though we got the time extension, I'm still sort of worried about our time, and think that perhaps it would be better, once we decide who we'd like to get information from, to maybe assign it to, to different people on the subcommittee, to just follow up with the person individually or pairs, and then report back. Unless it's a really broad topic. So, to me, what I'm asking for is a very specific, sort of limited piece of information. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Iona. Commissioner Sophia, would you like to speak on anything yet?
I was going to say, if we could re-invite the folks on the investigation, the Internal Affairs Investigation Board that we had heard from earlier. I think it would be good for us to have them again to speak now that we've gotten all our documents done. That was way at the beginning. And we hadn't had much work done at the time. So maybe we could get those folks back in. I can't remember their names offhand. But I thought it was very helpful. The information that they gave us at the time was quite helpful to see if and how we can combine. Because from what I can recall, there from the person who spoke, which I feel bad because I don't know the name, he was open to combining the two. So I think we could revisit that as well. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Tirsa, would you like to speak on?
I would say perhaps PSEP, since they are tasked with overseeing the implementation of the DOJ settlement agreement. And that's also something that we will be looking at in this subcommittee, and how does that, how will the new board relate to the DOJ and the settlement agreement? So I would say PSEP.
Commissioner Christian?
Yeah, I think I agree with people who have brought up folks we've met with in the past, such as like internal affairs and IPR, stuff like that. We get to get their opinion on what they think about the transition, and if they have any thoughts on what we've done so far, and how, if they, maybe they'll come up with something that might work that we're not catching, and how to trend and how the relationship could go. And I also had the thought that if we know of any, I have a specific connection in mind that I might be able to get the contact information of, if this is interesting to people, but folks in other jurisdictions who have gone through the process of implementing an oversight board. I don't know if there's someone we could talk to, or at least maybe even through email, just like get some kind of feedback on how that process worked for them, and what worked for them in terms of adjusting, putting something new in, and then how they relate to other city entities. Yeah, I can speak more on that with staff specifically, but that's another thought that comes to mind for me.
Commissioner Glenn?
I was going to just say, in general, we can review all of the different advisory groups, just have a list of those, because I know there's quite a few of them, and maybe we can go collect that list and then decide which ones, you know, we would like to hear from again. So I just, at this point, I don't have a list of them all, but I guess I'd be willing to get a list of them all and share them with the group, so that we can all look at them and decide which ones, which advisory groups we think are pertinent and that we'd like to get more information from. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff's just put in the chat, just to clarify, IPR is known to be phasing out, so they're going to be briefing in some way. Going to be briefing in some way to the other subcommittee, the transition plan, who mentioned them as well on Monday. This committee's members could also definitely do a briefing here, or go to that briefing too. So members from this subcommittee could be at that briefing. Just putting that there. Any other thoughts on possible briefers? there you are. Sorry, your hand's blending in, and Commissioner Semo.
All good. Yeah, so one of the people that I've kind of noticed, that have been in our commission calls, listening in, has been the DOJ attorney, Jared Hager. So interested in having him on board, as far as, just better understanding, what they would envision us keeping, as Samir said, and I'm sorry if I'm losing words right now, but it was along the lines of like, discussing, and I think a power of us is to be able to discuss what we keep, what we subsume, what we turn off, as far as the system, and consider unnecessary in these lines. It'd be interesting to kind of, now that we're heading towards this part of our phase, to kind of hear back from Counselor Hager on these things, particularly pertaining to his DOJ settlement.
Thank you, Commissioner Semo. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? So I just want to. Okay, I see. I second that. I just wanted to, oh, Commissioner Iona.
All right, one just popped into my head. So one thing I thought of when I, with this charter amendment and how the city works as a system, is it seems to me that the oversight board that we're working on is similar in its relationship and how it would fit in the city, system, is similar to the Prosper Portland, that used to be known as the Portland Development Commission, because they do the same thing that our board will do. The city council appoints, there's only five of them, and then it's up to them to hire the executive director, and they run, as a board, they kind of run the show. It's not like they're under a city council person or anything. I mean, the connection between city council and the PDC board is the fact that they're appointed. But so, I don't know, I think that it'd be interesting possibly to talk to somebody from there, maybe they're from their legal department or whatever, of how that works, as far as, because it's unusual, most bureaus in the city are under somebody's control, and that one is under the control of these 5 volunteer board members, which is similar to what we're going to have for our oversight board.
Thank you, Commissioner Iona. So I'm just going to kind of read back what I wrote in terms of the folks that you might be interested in briefing with, or having, like what Commissioner Iona had suggested, like some like one-on-ones, if it's like a quick briefing. So PSUP, IPR, internal affairs, and then feedback. Commissioner Freestone, you said feedback from others that have done this sort of thing. So like maybe someone from another city, or is that?
Yeah. I'm thinking specifically of someone in Olympia that I might be able to get the contact of. They went through this process recently, or not recently, the last few years or something like that. I might be able to have a connection. But other cities are great too if someone has a connection or is able to pull from that. I just feel like past experience of someone who's already gone through this process would be useful.
Okay. And then Gerald Hagar, is I'm saying their name correctly, from DOJ, and specifically to talk about the GOJ settlement, and then the legal department from Prosper Portland. Does that sound about correct for everybody? Wonderful. Commissioner Glenn.
Just piggybacking on Commissioner Christian's, having someone who's done it already before. I do know of a few people in Ohio that did this big DOJ. It was really quite interesting because they did this all jointly. So anyway, I'm going to try and see if I can contact one of the founders in that and see if she can help us give us some information, some insight, on that transition, because they've done it and, they're still working on it. I think it's been like 12 years or something. So thank you.
Thank you. Can you repeat the person's name that you were speaking of? I missed it. I'm sorry.
I didn't give it to you. I can't remember offhand.
I'm sorry. Okay, good.
I put
And-
it in the chat though. Thank you.
Please, yeah, thank you. And sorry for my mispronunciation of Jared Hager. I want to get that correctly. I'm terrible with names sometimes. My human flaw. Okay. Are there any other thoughts, questions about who you may want to see during this phase? Okay.
Consider this a good start.
I think this is a great start. Yeah. Okay, I think, let's see here. I think we can take a, yeah, I think we'll take a break since this is a little bit more of a pause, and then we can reconfigure our next section of tonight's meeting. And so it is 7:56. And I'll give you a 10-minute break. So we'll be back at 8:06. Thank you. We will now move into the discussing the content the subcommittee will discuss, including the content just mentioned. We will ask again to follow. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Commissioner Iona.
So I just want to throw one last idea to that previous conversation. When we're talking about like boards and committees that might be phased out, I'd like to add to that list, if others agree, that we include what to do with the police review board. And, because that needs, I mean, one would assume we won't need that anymore. And if that's the case, then what would be the timing on that? So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Iona. Okay. So we will now move into discussing the content this subcommittee will discuss, including the content just mentioned earlier. We will ask you to follow normal discussion rules. Please be brief each time you speak, even though you can speak multiple times. Please be facilitated. Remember, I use a weighted stack. With the co-chair, Commissioner C-Mob, would you like to get us started in our discussion, please?
Yes. Again, this is just kind of having us review the things that we kind of heard from everybody in the previous discussion. Commissioner Brown mentioning the current IPR, Commissioner Glenn mentioning internal affairs, Christian, Commissioner Christian mentioning that others that have gone through this process, and I think even Sophia chimed in on a board or a commission in Ohio and one of its founders to be able to reach out to. Commissioner Tirsa Oriana mentioned PSEP about its connection to the DOJ and its settlement agreement. That actually fed me to also want to think about how Attorney Jared Hager, who represents US DOJ in the settlement agreement against the city of Portland, has been a very frequent flyer as far as one of our meeting participants. Commissioner Iona mentioned the legal department of Prosper Portland, which is it's under the and one of the things I was questioning was I didn't understand how it was actually structured until she mentioned that it's under the control of 5 volunteer board members. That one. And also how Debbie, Commissioner Iona just also built off of that, talking about the boards and committees being phased out of the police review board as well. So these are some of the things that we've talked about. And I mean, I'm even still open to building upon what we've discussed as not only just discussing and expanding on what we just talked about.
I see one of the things that's outlined in your agenda is advisory groups related to policing and accountability. Let's see. Implementation of oversight board in context to the city government. So which parts of the current system should function or cease, and how and when to wind them down. We kind of brought that up a little bit. Maybe we can expand a little bit more on what folks are thinking. And then maybe number 2, other staff and entities related to accountability. So maybe thinking about that too. Just a couple other things.
I mean, like, yeah, which parts of the current system should function? Could you put that screen back up? Yeah, which part of the current system should function or cease to function? Yeah, I mean, I think I know I usually lean on the expertise and the experience of people like Commissioner Iona and Commissioner Handelman on being able to really understand and kind of dig into how the functions work. And I know Commissioner Handelman, if he's still around in one of our participants, would love to hear some feedback on like the systems. Yeah, he's one of our attendees on the current systems and functions, as well as those that should cease to function. But I'm going to pick on Commissioner Iona. Oh, there you go. Your hand went up. I was going to call you out.
Okay, great. Well, I'm ready. Now that I had a chance to think about this for a few minutes. So when I think I'm kind of probably more familiar with advisory groups. And so, the police bureau has a lot of those, I don't even know them all, but a lot of different advisory groups. So one that I know that's kind of been high profile lately is that focused intervention teen community oversight group, the one that's trying to reduce gun violence. But it seems to me that it's not our business to tell the police bureau what kind of advisory groups they should have. And so I kind of feel like we don't need to worry about the ones that are directly associated with the police bureau and that they have chosen to create in order to advise them. So then that gets rid of a lot of them. If we go that route, that gets rid of a lot that we don't need to worry about too much. And then, but then like, for example, like the PCCEP, so they're really there to give a place for the public to come and learn about and talk about and, come up with ideas about police bureau policies and a lot about what's related to the settlement agreement. And it's envisioned to last beyond the settlement agreement. And, I kind of think sometimes, you sort of think, well, maybe we could consolidate some of this stuff, but then I think that they do a lot and they're really kind of a valuable venue for the public to talk about these kinds of things. And they put a lot of time into it. If we handed that duty over to this oversight board, I feel like they already have their hands full with dealing with all the accountability stuff. And so I don't know, I'm definitely not thinking it's a good idea to get rid of the PCCEP. So I think that we should keep them around. And then same with the behavioral health unit advisory committee, and I'm sure I have that wrong. Although I'm not that familiar with them because their meetings aren't particularly open to the public. So I don't know. I'm very, we know the CRC will go away, but other than that, I really do think keeping the PCCP around is still a good idea. So those are my thoughts. Again, hands off the ones that are directly associated with the police bureau, and then think about the PCCP. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Ayana. Commissioner Sophia?
Yes, just kind of asking some questions for Commissioner Iona with the PSEP. What is their current makeup right now? I mean, are there members, how many, and what types? I'm just trying to follow your rationale for keeping them independently. Just I don't know as much about that group. I know of it, but I don't know it extensively. So
Before answering that question, a staff's hands raised, so I'd like to call on them.
Commissioner Sophia, you were asking about PCCEP? Yeah, they have 13 spots, of which currently 11 are full. The 12th one is going to be filled next week. And they have 11 spots that are at-large members and 2 reserved for youth members, which are the 2 vacant ones, one of which is being filled. All 11 of the at-large spots are already filled. Yeah. Oh, and sorry, if I could just add one other thing, the Focus Intervention Team Community Oversight Group, or FITCOG, is under the Community Safety Division, along with PCCEP or PSEP and the PAC itself. And then there is the Citizen Review Committee, which is currently supported by IPR, and then the other 14 or 15 are under PPB.
Thank you, staff. Commissioner Iona?
So my understanding was the PCCP was a creation of the mayor's office. And I mean, I know that CSD is under the mayor's office, but when they talk about their rules of how they operate as a public body, I remember there was a distinction between them and us because they're the mayor's committee and we're different than that. So I don't understand that, but yeah, thank you, Samir.
Staff, you can.
Yeah, so let me start by saying the Community Safety Division is a part of the Office of Management and Finance, which is under the commissioner in charge of the Office of Management and Finance is the mayor. However, the Community Safety Division has a unique reporting structure to all of the members of council, similar to what IPR has, if that makes sense, although it's not an independent bureau. And this is an oversimplification, but it does not exclusively report to the mayor. Switching gears to talk about the advisory groups, or these 2 groups in question, the PCCEP is part of the settlement agreement. It does have members appointed by the mayor, and that is unique, that is different, I should say, than the PAC, whose members are appointed by the city council. Additionally, because of who their recommendations go to, they're subject to different public meetings law. That might be obligations, and that might be something we get someone from the city attorney's office to clarify if it's at all helpful. But yeah, that is the difference that was brought up a while ago, but it's not the only one. There's obviously several other differences.
Thank you, staff. Commissioner Sophia?
yes, I just want to thank staff and Commissioner Iona for helping out with that. So my thought is, I don't remember what we just said a few minutes ago about who we're gonna have, but to talk to us, but it would be nice to have PSEP as well.
ESEP's on.
Yeah, I felt bad because I just couldn't remember. Yeah, because I'd like to understand a little bit more. I'll have to do some research on my own or some studying up for that. But I do want to move on to a couple other things as they're just ideas. And I know Samir, you just took it right off. If you could put it right back on. I was thinking more about just off the top of my head, some of the, how will the system relate to the county government and the state government and the federal government? And I heard some folks mention earlier, what about, the DA's office? What about the my brain is going dead all of a sudden. I'm just thinking about some of the other items that are not under our control, but I think the oversight board should have some dealings with. And the other thing is, like, when there's deadly force, I know we're talking about, how do we do that? How will the board interact in that? Will the board, when they have these hearings to determine, if they're the officer, and they're usually closed, will the board be able to be listening at least in those, because they're not open to the public? Even the victims' relatives are not allowed in those hearings. And how will the new board be able to be a part of that? I think it's going to be really important for the board to be involved in that somehow, especially since they're closed to the public, they're closed to the victims, they're closed to the victims' relatives, and it's just this question mark in that, and there's no real support for the defendant, I should say. So I want us to think about how the board might be involved in that. So that's about it for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. Commissioner Christian, your hand is up.
Yeah. Would it be possible to try and have a briefing with someone from the DA's office to talk about that subject, or is that not within our purview for some reason or other that I don't know?
Staff, do you have a answer to that question?
To get someone from the DA's office?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we reached out, another couple of members had asked, we've reached out a couple of months ago and haven't heard back yet, but can definitely bring that one back up and get it going.
Commissioner Sima.
Yeah, I can try and help with some connections with the DA's office over there. Also, yeah, just to kind of backtrack as well, I think from hearing Commissioner Iona speak about the a lot of the advisory commissions that are set up under the Portland Police Bureau, to me, it's more interesting that they exist than they shouldn't, because, like, for instance, I see folks that are community leaders from my community that are listed as members of some of these or one of these committees, and allows me, like, as an organizer, an inroad, a way to be tangible with those that are engaged in policing from specific communities, and understand who police are actually talking to, or if they're even engaging, because a lot of these meetings have been defunct for a very long time. So I'm on the side of agreeing with Commissioner Iona on those related to PPB's volunteer commissions. Yumi Delgado's in our in our attendees. And I think oh yeah, no, that's directed to staff. So if you can answer that question, staff, I think you're working on, oh yeah, you're working on that. And Jared Hager from USDOJ is also in our chat. And the Q&A. And I'm not sure if I haven't read through the whole thing. I believe I'll read it to record. It would inform at 8:01. They put in that they don't know if I'll just read it as Jared Hager wrote. Thank you, staff. I don't know if I heard this group in your list, but when the city proposes to DOJ amendments to the settlement agreement to comply with the newly remedy related to accountability, or I'm sorry, with the new remedy related to accountability, paragraph 195, the understanding is that those amendments will be proposed to us by the city attorney's office. We will consider whether the city proposes remedies that are sufficient to remedy the non-compliance we found in 2020. It's heavy, but I'm following. If the DOJ agrees with what the city attorney's office proposes, then the city and the US will file a motion with the court to adopt those amendments. If the DOJ finds that the city's proposed amendments aren't sufficient, we will negotiate changes or additions with the city. In that regard, it will be helpful for the DOJ to have this commission's evaluation of what city council does or does not accept from our proposals. I hope this makes sense. So yeah. I hope that informs as well. But it's cool to have Yumi and Jared with us in our attendees list.
Thank you, Commissioner Seemob, and Commissioner Iona, your hand is raised.
So another interesting thing about the DA's office is, like when there's a police shooting, the district attorney opens a criminal investigation, and IPR, Internal Affairs, does the administrative investigation. And it's very important to keep them separate because the administrative investigators can compel testimony as a condition of the police officer's employment. But in the criminal side, the officers do, they have their Fifth Amendment rights. They don't have the obligation to answer questions. So that's why you have to keep a wall between the two types of investigations. So the way we've envisioned our system, though, is once the whole investigation is done, the administrative investigation, then when it goes to the oversight board for presentation and then a decision on the findings, we want that to be done in the public. That's what our plan says now. But then you wouldn't want, if the criminal investigation isn't finished yet, you wouldn't want information from the administrative to cross over to the criminal, because then that would upset the criminal side. So I think that would be another interesting thing to talk about if we get an opportunity to talk to the DA's offices. How could you work that out so that you don't run the risk ever of messing up the criminal investigation because of information that drifted out of the administrative, because we want to have the proceedings open. So we should put that on the DA's list, that question.
Thank you, Commissioner Iona. Any Commissioner Sophia?
Yes, I was just thinking, how will the board interact, or if they will interact with the coroner's office? Is that through the investigations and the 911 type things? I'm just thinking, I know this is information that we get from them, but I don't know, it just seems like, in my mind, we just need to look into that and those types of relationships. I think they're quite important. But I'm just not sure how to phrase it. So thank you.
Thank you, staff, for making that note. I saw Commissioner Mob, so I'm gonna go with you first, and then I'll go to Commissioner Iona.
Yeah, I think as how the new system will relate to the county government. I know Chair Vega Peterson's office, Jessica Vega Peterson, who's the new chair to the county, but also long-running county commissioner. They under her chair, she has the local public safety coordinating council, which is my former employer with Multnomah County. And I think that would be an interesting entity to hear from as they relating to an accountability system and how it relates to the county government. I think this would be a direct connection to it. So maybe reaching out to members of her or her staff would be important to hear from in drawing this connection.
Thank you, Commissioner Mob. Commissioner Iona.
So another thing I was thinking we might want to consider recommending in our report is that the different advisory groups, I know there's already that CAG, although I don't think their meetings are open to the public, so we don't really know what goes on in there. But you know, I've attended the CRC meetings for a number of years, and I go to some of the Training Advisory Council meetings. And it's interesting how sometimes, you know, one group will be starting on a similar thing at the same time as the other one, and it feels like they don't know what the other one is doing. And so we might want to recommend that they do that CAG type thing where they have like every other month or something get together and just share what's going on in each other's groups. And then perhaps sometimes they can do joint projects or whatever, but just that we suggest that they meet on a regular basis in the open and talk about what they're doing.
Thank you, Commissioner Iona. Commissioner Sophia.
Yes, I like that idea, Commissioner Iona, and my thought was, you know, who runs that? Will the board have like a big invite for all of those organizations, or, you know, I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know. It's a good idea. I was just wondering how much and if the board should be involved in like doing that, coordinating that kind of activity. So anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lynn. Any other comments about how the system will relate to the county government? Commissioner Christian.
Hi, this is not, actually, I don't know if this is related to specifically to the county government, but two things I wanted to voice support for Commissioner Glenn's idea there, or at least to consider it for the future. I don't know what the breakdown is, current breakdown is of the expected budget for the future board, but it might be interesting if there is an inclination to try and be have the board be some sort of a bridge or coordination between various groups to be able to communicate with each other better. Maybe create a position for that or something. I'm not really sure if that would be needed, but there's kind of like, that's something that comes to my mind when I think about that. And then I'm also curious, I feel like no one's mentioned internal affairs, and I know that question has come up in the past. I know we have to cover it in this subcommittee in the space of work. So I'm just curious if anyone has any thoughts on that. Yeah, if not, I can speak.
I see Commissioner Iona's hand raised. Did you want to speak on Commissioner Christian's? Okay.
Yeah, here's just my thought on that. It seems like if pretty much all the investigations are going to be done by our new civilian agency, that internal affairs, all the investigators in their department, you wouldn't need as many. And I don't know, I don't know if we still think it'll be, I forgot if we worked this out or if it's a question that's still up in the air. Like, what happens if two police officers get in a fight in the locker room? I mean, it's not involving any community members. Should that just be dealt with internally, and then the internal affairs, like the last two internal affairs investigators are the ones who end up sorting that out, and then the supervisors end up taking care of it, and it wouldn't have to go to the oversight board. So, but I do think that we should think about what happens to internal affairs. But my thought is it would shrink a lot. So yeah, so that's my answer.
Okay, let's do Commissioner Christian, then Co-Chair Simov, and then if you still have something that you want to say, Sophia, then you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Iona. That you're reminding me that is kind of where we landed. We talked about this in the oh man, there's so many subcommittees these days. I can't remember the officer accountability subcommittee way back when. And I think that is around where we landed. I think the reason that we didn't put in specific language was because we weren't sure, we didn't want to make that call in that subcommittee when the actual phase of needing to make that decision was now. I think shrinking it was sounds right. When you were speaking, I thought that I think internal affairs might already be on the list, but that might be a question to add to ask them specifically, or maybe not a question, but a dialogue to open up to be like, if you were to still exist, what would you want to take on, or what would be best for you to take on, or maybe they want to take on more than we are imagining, and maybe they want to remain larger. I'm not sure. I feel like in the past when we've spoken with different police entities, they have been somewhat vocal about wanting to have a little bit less of a hand in some of the accountability work. So maybe they would be okay with shrinking. I just feel like that might be a dialogue to open up with them. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Christian. Can we move to question 3? Or is anything else on question 2? Yeah, Commissioner Sophia? Oh, and then Commissioner Sima. Oh, Commissioner Sima. Then?
Yes.
And
Yeah,
Commissioner
sorry. Yeah, I think just what was discussed with internal affairs, actually with what Debbie and Christiana were bringing up, it's really interesting point to kind of consider, like why they would remain and under what scope that they would remain. One of the things that the thoughts that occurred to me is that if, like, for instance, one officer got in a fight with another officer and there was this internal strife that had to be dealt with, rather than even a department like internal affairs, why not just allow like their HR process to be able to handle stuff like that, like any organization would have, rather than like an entire investigation unit that's kind of really chopped down to just kind of internally manage these little minutia of behavior issues. That's one thing that comes up for me. Also, the fact that there's the professional standards division that exists already for them, and that can also and does address these issues as well before they even get elevated to IA. So I think considering and maybe figuring out like what processes exist that already fill in most of those gaps before it ever even makes it to IA or an IPR process as it currently exists, to be able to be like, you know, to consider like, yeah, maybe we just completely take over and IA in itself and just cut them out the picture.
Thank you, Co-Chair Simov. Commissioner Sophia?
I'm just listening to Co-Chair Simob, and I'm agreeing with them. I don't remember if we have them on our list to talk to, but if we don't, I would suggest that we have them on there, just to kind of get some more insight into that as we make decisions on this. You know, let's just leave it like that. Thank you.
Okay. So Oh, staff?
Yeah, I just wanted to note one thing that may be helpful from the Q&A, that there are 3 types of police review boards, and thank you to Vice Chair Delgado for this. One is the automatic ones that are convened when there's officer-involved shootings and in custody deaths. One is contravened, also known as disputed, use of force findings. And the third type is contravened, disputed, quote, HR type, end quote, claims, including officer courtesy complaints and bureau-on-bureau complaints. That's the current system as per Vice Chair of the CRC. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. Are there any other comments or questions about this particular topic? Okay. Let's see. I think we'll conclude if no one has any more comments or questions about any of the top, at least the top 3 items that are on this agenda, then we'll go to next steps.
All right, so the co-chairs of both subcommittees did a scoping exercise to figure out sort of what goes into this subcommittee, what goes into that subcommittee, and what's in this phase in the first place, and kind of came up with a potential way to sort of break down the work. You've been looking at that way actually to some degree this whole time, which is for this subcommittee, which is 5 sort of subsections of it. What might change, the parts that don't change, how does it relate, county, state, and federal. So 5 sort of subsections. And in talking to the subcommittee co-chairs, wanted to ask if there were folks that wanted to volunteer to kind of take the lead in developing a particular section. Now, specifically, the city side is going to need probably a few more people than the other sections. And the purpose of this is, as a drafting group, is to just kind of take the existing discussions that have already happened, the discussions today, and try to formulate the starting point text that within a meeting or 2 could be discussed by the subcommittee and eventually formed into areas of agreement. And so put the 5 subsections in the chat, and kind of 2 of them together as a city one. Kind of, you could consider that a double group for now that might need to sort of break apart or all of that in the future. But if there's maybe if everyone wanted to, I think co-chair CMUB was 2 per person, the number that we were talking about. Okay, so yeah, and so just drop this in the chat, and if everyone would like to put in the chat what they're interested in doing. And the next meeting of this subcommittee is the 30th, so you've got at least 12 days on it. And then feel free to work with, it'll be probably 2 or 3 people per group. And it can't be more than 3, just as a reference point.
So we'll just give a moment for folks to volunteer.
Yes, just a moment. Just put it in the chat.
Yeah.
So that's in the chat now, and for A and B are kind of one question together. So if you just want to pick a couple numbers, basically, and feel free to drop them in the chat. If anyone has any questions on that, I think co-chairs or myself can answer it too. So seeing these come in here, reposted, so for the sake of transparency.
Five is the short kid on the basketball court. Nothing was ever wrong with that, by the way.
Well, not everyone is here today, so we'll get everyone signed up for something soon. But feel free to drop any others that you think of in there, and we'll go. I know the commissioner is absent today. Might have I actually do know has an interest in at least some of these. So yeah. Thank you. Happy to pass it back over to co-chairs or facilitators as the case may be.
Thank you. Thank you for volunteering. I'll just say that for everybody. We have a public comment that's next. So we will now take open public comment on the issues of the subcommittee is discussing, or community members can also tell their story about policing and police accountability. We ask members of the public to keep their comments or questions to 3 minutes in length and raise their hand in Zoom if you'd like to speak. So I see 2 participants already. Let's see. Sorry. Have it on here. Let's see. Thank you.
Yay, Vice Chair Delgado in the house.
Good evening, everyone. Yumei Delgado. I'm the vice chair of the CRC. As always, thank you for all of your hard work on this project. And as always, the CRC stands ready if you need us to weigh in on any of this stuff. 2 very quick things that I just wanted to sort of highlight for you, echoing what I said in the chat or in the Q&A about the PRB process. I think the only question I would raise is whether or not there is something that needs to exist outside of the new oversight process that's handled by internal affairs or the PRB process. And there's arguments for that or against it. I think I'll leave it up to you to make that determination, but it's probably going to center around those things that are not already going to be part of the complaint or review process. And I think the question would be, is there benefit to the Bureau handling their own HR complaints? And I suppose, is there benefit to the Bureau having a separate PRB for an officer-involved shooting that does not have, the community oversight component to it? It kind of seems like double jeopardy to me. You'd be up for discipline under two different scenarios, but that's a question that you all can answer. And then the other thing about oversight bodies, I think Commissioner Iona had some very good points to make about, the things that the Bureau wants is the Bureau's business, and the things that the city wants is the city's business. I would point out, I think there are like 16 advisory bodies right now, most of which are bureau facing, but some of are public facing. One of the things that you are going to be doing is you're going to be taking hypothetically your 33 best police oversight experts in the city and putting them on this new body and effectively making them sign a non-compete because they're not supposed to be serving on other public official bodies. And so I think there is some sense you want to be careful about putting too many other tasks out in the world that are going to be filled by the same people. So a lot of people that I know who've worked on PCEP also ended up being on the PAC or on the CRC or on TAC or on FitCog or whatever. Not only does that tax our resources, as Commissioner Iona mentioned, but I think that's going to be a harder thing to do now that more and more of these bodies have a you can only be on one city body thing. And I think I've started to see that in most of the applications that have come out of community life. So something to consider. You have a pretty big organization. Some of those public facing roles can probably be folded into that new organization, which is going to allow you to retain the most amount of talent. I think there's only so many people in the city that want to do this work. And so that's something to keep in mind, especially because they're going to have to rotate in and out every 7 years or so. So those are my two thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw Commissioner Handelman.
Oh, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, this is Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a member of the commission. I appreciated listening to the conversation tonight. You know, the Training Advisory Council is one of the few advisory groups that didn't come up in the list, but it was mentioned a few times after that list was generated, so I just want to make sure not to forget them. They have 30 members and meet once every other month, but advise directly only the training division of the Portland Police Bureau. So it's very focused and directed, and I kind of second Commissioner Iona's suggestion of kind of letting these advisory bodies that have specific tasks continue those specific tasks, but to make sure that everybody talks to each other. That was done kind of spontaneously by the Citizen Review Committee, the Training Advisory Council, and the PCCP for a while, and I think those meetings stopped happening. In terms of connecting with the district attorney's office, I'm very glad that a question came up about how to make sure the prosecutions don't get affected by the new board's public meetings. Generally, grand juries are done in the first 45 days after the shooting happens, and we're envisioning up to 180 days for the board. And with a complicated investigation like that, it probably will take longer than the 45 days. So it probably won't be a problem, but it's something to think about. The city council had a meeting yesterday. I don't know how many of you saw it. I know several of you were there, but the people who weren't there, there were some troubling questions that got brought up, and I think we should talk about how to deal with some of them. One was that the city council itself has had trouble issuing subpoenas in the past. I think our document says that we would approach the DA's office to issue those subpoenas if need be, and that is definitely something that would be a good idea to talk to them about before we say that's how the new board's going to do it. The question of the police review board, essentially we agreed that that's going to have to phase out for at least for the things that aren't just internal HR related cases, because the new board's going to be handling the shootings, and the new board's going to be handling any case that has to do with officer discipline where there's a civilian involved. But in terms of the transition, and you know, again, maybe that goes to the other subcommittee. What if there's a case of a officer involved shooting that happens just before the new board gets its staff and gets investigated by the current internal affairs, and it takes 18 months to go through that process? It's not really fair to the new board to have them reviewing internal affairs investigation, and it's not really fair to the officers to have them go to this new board where the process that they are going through would normally end up in a police review board. So that board might need to have an extended, slow phasing out period. That's just something to think about. And my final thing is that in the state.
No, Commissioner, you already passed your 3 minutes.
Okay, well, I'm going to say the letters LESCC. It's a state body that you should think about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Handelman. And last but not least, Jared Hager. DOJ.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for your service and helping the city define a new accountability structure for the police bureau. I think the work is extremely important and I appreciate all your volunteer efforts. I just wanted to mention two things. The first, just in regard to the interplay of the settlement agreement or federal oversight that's ongoing through the Department of Justice. We are, as I've mentioned before in a presentation to you all, our view is that you should not feel constrained at all by what's in the existing settlement agreement, because the idea behind the ballot measure, behind this work, behind the paragraph of the settlement agreement that codifies this remedy of the Accountability Commission and the work you're doing as a new remedy for the failures we found in 2020 is to come up with a new system to make amendments to the settlement agreement. So I hope you don't feel constrained by anything that's in there. You'd be constrained only by the work you've done and the knowledge you've gained and the creative processes that you have to make for effective accountability. With regards to a lot of the other groups that exist, I know that PCEP, CRC, some of those organizations are requirements under the settlement agreement. Again, that doesn't mean they can't change or be under a different structure. But I did want to note that all of those advisory committees that the Bureau has adopted or listens to, they've made it very clear that they are not public bodies, that they are not under the auspices of the city. They have refused to allow the Department of Justice to sit in on their meetings for that very reason. So we have no access. They're not subject to public meetings laws or public records. Now the Bureau supports them and sends their people there. So I'm not sure exactly how that works, but it's not a hill we were going to die on. But I hope you don't feel constrained by the many advisory groups that consider themselves to have some special place in the Bureau's hearts and minds to be advisors to them, because they are just their own groups, own private groups. At least that's what they put in a letter to us. So again, appreciate all your work. I look very forward to the recommendations you make, and happy to answer questions or come present if there's something more I can help with. Thanks.
Thank you. Staff?
Yeah, thank you. Just to a point that Commissioner Dan made in his public comment, the question about the case that is under investigation that was originated from a complaint filed just before the sort of jurisdictional handover, that is something definitely that the other subcommittee will be talking about. So just wanted to verify that and say it's not forgotten and not being glossed over in any way, just going to be discussed in the other subcommittee. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for your comments. We are now going to go to the garden plot recap. This is a time for facilitators, co-chairs, and staff to summarize any items brought up today, which didn't fit in today's agenda. We'll recap those items here and use them in developing future agendas. We won't be using this time to add new items to not previously mentioned, and to discuss any items, but we will use this list to develop future agendas so the items can be addressed. First off, are there any for the co-chairs? Did the co-chair CMOB, do you have anything for the garden plot? No. Okay. Facilitator Victoria, did you have anything? Staff?
Oh, thank you.
All right. And all the items that I had put on have already been put into record, so I think we can move on. All right. So as a reminder, you can submit your advanced public comment to the Police Accountability Commission in via web form, voicemail, or postmail. Thank you to all members who attended today's meeting and their contributions today. Thank you to the interpreters And finally, thank you to members of the community for attending and contributing your thoughts and questions. If you have not already signed up for email, please also sign up to receive updates from the PAC. You can also get a hold of the PAC through web form, voicemail, or postmail for advanced comment. Let's see, it is 9:01. Oh, and before I adjourn the meeting, the next meeting of the subcommittee is Tuesday, May 30th. It is now 9:01 and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for your time today. Have a nice night.